Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled is composer Carol Hall and jewelry artist Marianne Hunter. Composer, lyricist, playwright, Carol Hall was born and raised in Texas and graduated from Sarah Lawrence College. Carol's written for TV and film. She's received 2 Drama Desk Awards for her Broadway musicals, one of which was The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. Carol, did you plan when you left Sarah Lawrence that you were going to be on Broadway?
I did.
You did?
I did. That was my goal. That was my goal.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Did you take those kind of classes at Sarah Lawrence?
Actually, Sarah Lawrence was a place where you could make up a class like that. Oh. And I made up a class that I took with a man named Meyer Kupferman, who, speaking of musical cutting edge, was very much on the cutting edge of contemporary classical music. And I said to him, let's look at plays and let's pretend to turn them into musicals, but really odd plays like Death of a Salesman. Just to get into my mind and heart the whole idea of how one structured drama into music.
I didn't realize that, but there was music in your family. So
yes,
you came from a musical background.
Yes, my father owned, my father's family owned the only music store in Abilene, Texas, Hall Music Store, and my mother was, and she's still alive, is a great musical groupie, and she also played the violin and the piano.
She was accomplished in the violin, wasn't she?
Right.
Did those things help you? Is that why you went there, with the idea of making your own class?
Well, you know Gypsy, you know Mama Rose?
Yes.
Well, if you pretend that my mother was Mama Rose, but she really wanted me to be a classical pianist.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
You
did
know.
you play?
I did.
I did. When you compose, what do you use?
I use different things. Sometimes I go to the piano, and interestingly enough, I'm not much of a pianist. I somehow managed to fulfill my mother's dream of being a musician, but in a field that is not hers.
The thing is, when you write,
which is not classical
when you write music, because I've heard you've performed it.
I do.
In cabaret, so you have to play, don't you?
Yeah, I play simply. I play I don't play as many notes as, say, Marvin Hamlish. He plays more notes than I do.
But he kind of has the same kind of voice and attitude that you do when you're on stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a composer's kind of genre.
Maybe so. I understand the theory. I know the theory. I'm well schooled relatively. And you ask, how do I do it? Sometimes I play the piano and I just riff. I'll just search around on the piano for motifs or rhythms or riffs. And sometimes I do it away from the piano in order to...
With what? Just in your head?
Mm-hmm. Or I'll start with a lyric, because I do both.
Oh, you do. So every piece that you've composed, you've done the music and the lyrics?
No, I go both ways. I'll collaborate. When I did a lot of stuff for Sesame Street, they would often give me lyric ideas, and then I would do only music.
Well, they would have to do that because they were teaching something, right? And they wanted specifics.
Exactly.
So you could work with specifics like that?
Yeah, I love working with specifics.
Was that Sesame Street the beginning of your career? Was that the beginning of public television?
The beginning of my career is really before that, which is that I went to 2 colleges. I went to the one my family picked, which was a very proper, wonderful Southern school called Sweetbriar. And then I escaped that and went to Sarah Lawrence, where they let me make up my own classes.
Yeah, that was great.
And in both of those places, I learned that there were boys' schools around, and they had musicals. And if you were a girl, it was kind of a cool thing to go over and offer my songwriting services to the boys' schools.
So you were doing it then. You were like really working with people, collaborating, writing purposefully, with purposes.
Right.
What was the big break then? What do you think your big break was?
I think it was a series of small attempts, many of which did not work. But when you look back, it turns out to make sense. Whether you're at college at Sarah Lawrence, deciding to do a musical moment with Blanche Dubois in Streetcar, whether you're writing something for the college musical, and what you have is the sophomores singing about how hard it is. All of those are tasks, and in those tasks, you're saying, what's the music saying? What's the song telling the audience? When I came to New York, I wrote songs about my friends. I wrote songs for them. I wrote about their love life. I wrote about my love life.
Did people care?
Yeah,
Were
they
people
thought
using them?
No, nobody was using them. I just was doing it.
I see.
And then there was a woman named Mabel Mercer. And if you don't know her, she is the person of whom Frank Sinatra said she taught him everything he knew about phrasing.
Was she a blues? She was a blues singer?
No,
Not a
no.
blues
She
singer.
sang beautiful classic songs from
Oh,
the
she
20s
did.
up until last Tuesday. And she would sing, "Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars."
Oh, she did.
She would
Oh,
sing
but
that
was-
when no one else did it. And people like Barbra Streisand and Frank Sinatra were in her audiences. And she had a small, small little club. It was called a boîte. And I hung out there. And one day I called her up. I really was bodacious. I called her up. I didn't know how ridiculous this was. I called her up and I said, "Miss Mercer, I'm Carol Hall and I write songs." And she was very gracious. And she said, "Well, let me hear some." And so she
Really?
told me to drop them by her house. And I dropped them by her house, and that was on a Monday. And on a Thursday, I was a little offended that she hadn't called me back. So I called her up. And I said, "Miss Mercer, this is Carol Hall. What about those songs?" And she said, "Actually, I'm learning one right now." And that was the
Really?
first. It wasn't a big break in the sense of Billy Joel doing your song.
But it's a break, right?
It was a real break because she was known to the real people in
To
the
the
know.
cognoscenti,
Yes, to the
right.
cognoscenti. That she did really good songs, like "Fly Me to the Moon."
Oh, so if she sang your song, that was like
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra listening
yeah,
to it.
it
I
was.
see,
And
see.
I've often thought maybe Barbra Streisand heard her do my song "Jenny Rebecca."
Because Barbra
Because
Streisand
she called
did,
and asked for it.
Yeah. I was going to go
So,
through this list
yeah.
of people who did sing your song: Dolly Parton, Barbra
Right.
Streisand, Tony Bennett,
Right,
and of course
right.
Mabel Mercer. But Big Bird,
Big Bird.
Big
He's-
Bird
yes.
sang your songs too.
Did, and my new favorite thing that really proves that I'm immortal is that Kermit the Frog has just done a song of mine.
Is that right? Is
Yeah.
it a new song or
A
something
new
you
song.
did?
A new
Oh,
song.
Carol,
Yeah.
that's 30 years
I
ago.
know, I know, Kermit. I had to ask for his autograph.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Oh, that really
But
does
really-
take
yeah.
a continuum.
I hope.
That's fabulous. So then how'd you get to Broadway?
I don't know. I don't know.
Was it a
was
long
in
haul?
my mind.
An overnight success for after 10 years or something
Yes,
like that?
I tried a number of shows that I thought would make good musicals.
Yeah.
Somewhere in here, I could now call up people and say Mabel Mercer did 2 of my songs.
Oh, I see. So that
And recorded
started.
them on a really well-known album she did with Bobby Short. I could say that new unknown singer Barbra Streisand has just recorded my song Jenny Rebecca. So it was just building, inch by inch. And then I would do 2 or 3 musicals that wouldn't get on because I didn't have the rights. I was so naive.
And then was that your LP? Then did you make that LP?
Then I made the LP because somewhere around here, Carole King was the biggest thing that had ever happened, and she was a wonderful songwriter doing her own songs. And so then there were record companies looking for other women songwriters.
Is that what happened?
That's what happened. All the record companies said, "Oh, that did well.
I
Who
know.
else can we get?"
And they found Carol Hall.
And they found me.
And they found Carol Hall, and I just had barely met you then.
Right,
Barely
right.
met you. But I remember the story because you went to Bendel's and you bought this beautiful dress that my friend Zondra Rhodes designed
Right, for the cover.
for the cover.
I forgot that.
Oh
I
no,
forgot
that was so exciting.
those things, they didn't sell, those lovely records. They did not sell at all. They're kind of, but again, who knows? I mean, who really knows what's important and what's not?
When did I don't want to miss Broadway,
Right,
but
right.
when did Marlo Thomas's thing come in? Before
Marlo
Broadway?
Thomas, yes, before Broadway. Marlo got the idea to do this project for children called Free to Be You and Me. And it basically, without anyone really realizing how or why, it rode the crest of the women's movement in.
It did, didn't it?
Right, and the reason for it was that Marlo wanted to do songs and stories and poems and things that would be fun for little kids that did not have the classic boys are tough, girls only like to play dolls message.
But there were a lot of well-known songs that people were singing at the time. I mean, ditties that you would remember.
No, it was all new material, and it became huge.
That's what I mean. After you wrote it, then people remembered.
Yes, yeah.
So, because I remember that.
It was big, and it became a book, and it became a television show, and in fact, this new Kermit thing I just had happened from Marlo. She just did a similar project called Thanks and Giving, because she thinks that kids these days are so overstructured and overscheduled that they really need to take some time to examine giving and being aware of being thankful. And so the same people, you know, Sheldon Harnick. And
do you think these people from your past will start coming, you know, continuing to come back to you and doing projects and working with you? Is that what's happened?
I hope so. I think Marlo knows that I love to do that. And
so other
she
people
knows to call me. She's funny. I have to just interrupt you for a moment and say that on a very rainy day recently, she was finishing up the album, and she called, and she's fast. She says, Carol, Marlo, you know, like you just were talking 10 minutes ago. Marlo, who? You do not dare say, oh, Marlo. And she said, you know what? I forgot a song for myself, and I need it. And I said, I can do it. And it was this big, big rain was outside. And I said, when do you need it? And she said, this afternoon.
Oh my gosh.
And I did write her a song that
Really?
afternoon. I did.
Oh, well, you can do it.
Well, I didn't know I could till then, but that was fun. And then I took it down.
Were
in
you
the
in New
rain
York?
Uh-huh.
You were in New York during it,
Took
because
it
you
down.
live in New York, I know,
Yeah.
and you visit because Daniel Blinkoff, your son, is
Yes.
an actor here.
My son, Daniel Blinkoff, is presently one of the leading roles in A Distant Shore.
I know, he's such a good actor.
By Shay Chu.
He is a great actor. But please,
Yes.
in our remaining couple of minutes,
That's a name I hear.
because Best Little Whorehouse in Texas was
Okay.
on Broadway 5 years.
It was. And it's still touring. It's on tour right now.
Can you imagine?
No. Okay, here's what happened. I had 3 friends from Texas, and we went to see a play by a Texan called Vanities. The play was about 3 Texas cheerleaders, and we, the Texans, other Texans, went out to dinner afterwards, and I said, I always wanted to do that. I always wanted to do something about Texas that really was truthful and wasn't what I call farmers with their thumbs in their suspenders. And my friend, who was a man named Pete Masterson, said, well, what'd you want to do? And I said, I wanted to do The Last Picture Show as a musical. And he said, well, you can't get the rights to that, but I know something we can get. And it was an article that had been in Playboy magazine.
Right.
And it was by Larry King, and Pete Masterson brought me the article the next day. And his wife, Carlin Glenn, played the lead, won a Tony. And we just kind of wrote it together.
And you went, I mean, how long did it take to get to Broadway?
Not long.
I know.
Not long. They were in Actors Studio, both Pete and Carlin, and we went over and just did it. You know, people always say things like, how'd you get that?
I know.
You don't. You just
do it. Do you think timing has a lot to do with it?
I do. I think it was a charming book. I think it was about, you know, it was not about prostitution. It was really about hypocrisy. Mm-hmm. This was about a true story, a bordello that had run for over 100 years in Texas.
And it was like a necessity, wasn't it? I mean, it was like part of the landscape.
And it was very sweet, you know, and
That's
the madam
what I mean.
had these rules that you couldn't wear your skirts too short, and you couldn't drink or smoke.
It was sweet.
And that was true. Yeah,
it was
another time.
in a real kind of quaint way, wasn't it?
Right.
The one thing I remember you're saying about the Best Little Whorehouse is we have the most gorgeous chorus line of boys.
Well, it's true. There was a real dance number for the tired businesswoman. You know? No, yeah, we did. The Aggie number.
Yeah.
And Tommy Tune ended up being our co-director along with Pete. And
How lucky. All you Texans got together and did something, didn't you?
Tommy'd gone to high school with Carlin, so that's what I mean. In Texas. Yeah. It was wonderful.
Well, I'm so glad we finally got to do this, and we could talk for hours.
But
thank you, Carol Hall.
Thank you. Thank you.
And don't
Great
go
fun.
away. We'll be right back with Marianne Hunter, whose work is on the set today.
This is so beautiful.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. I'm here with jewelry designer, who is a jewelry artist as well, Marianne Hunter. She was born and raised in Southern California, and she went to Cal State Northridge. Did you study to be a jewelry designer at Northridge?
No, actually, I dropped out of college because it was interfering with my enamel work.
Is that right?
I put in 3 years, and I realized that for me, as stubborn as I was, college was like babysitting. It was like an incubation period for me. And
so you were already into enamel work at that time?
I started enameling in '67, just as I graduated high school.
Oh,
And
were you painting? Were you drawing?
I knew I was going to be an artist from the time that I could hold a pencil. And I studied art all through school. I took private lessons with local painters when I was a kid. I went to Otis and UCLA when I was in junior high school.
So you
but
were
always in
pursuing
painting.
that.
Yes.
But always in painting. So you had a color sense.
Right.
Which really shows up in the work that you've done.
Well, the odd thing about that is the first major breakthrough I made in enamel was in developing a technique of enamel work called grisaille. And that's black and white. And I worked only in black and white for 12 or 13 years.
Spell it for me, because I'd never seen that word before.
It's Grisaille. And it's French, and it basically means variations of gray.
But it's applied to the enamel work? Is that what they call it? Black? Oh,
it can
apply
be,
it to anything.
Right, it can be applied in a number of different ways, but it is a technique of enamel work.
But how did you get into to metal, working with metals, when you were painting?
I was dragged into it screaming.
You were really?
I did not enjoy the metal work. The enamel work, I was completely captivated from the first moment that I did it. It's a wonderful, seductive medium of glass. But I was developing the enamel work and moving along when a friend of mine said, if you're going to go anywhere with this, seriously, you have to start setting it in silver.
But what were you doing enamel on?
Copper with a little hole punched in it and a little neck ring, and I was doing street shows in LA.
You were doing hippie
San
things.
Francisco. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Were you? Yeah.
Yes, yes. So it was very easy to get started in the decorative arts at that time because the shows were very inexpensive.
Oh, but then when you came to metalwork, what materials did you need that you weren't using before?
Sterling silver and fine silver softer for the bezels that go around the pieces, or did. Now I use 24 karat. But
So
I needed to learn to solder, and that was the problem.
That's what you didn't want to do.
Yeah, I didn't. It seemed like a mechanical step, and I'm only interested in something that's emotional. So it was important to learn to do the metalwork, and it was when I learned to make the metalwork painterly that I began to love doing that too.
But when you started working in the metalwork, was it a strenuous kind of thing? I mean, is the soldering iron heavy?
Do you want to feel my muscles?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
I have huge, very strong arms.
Are those tools heavy to deal with, even though you're making small things?
Sometimes the things that require the most strength are holding something really tiny perfectly still while you're, I have very scarred and old-looking hands.
Shall I hold one of these while you're talking?
Sure.
And then I'll just hold this while you're talking about it, but go on and tell me, because it wouldn't look like this has to be something that you have to be strong enough to.
Well, it's, to go through one of the pieces, I think this one might be a good one to start with, because it actually has the grisaille enamel in it.
Oh, all right, let's talk about this.
And that's where I started making my name. I would start with a copper blank, and then fire.
This is a copper blank?
Right, where the enamel is.
Oh, I see.
Where the image is.
Okay.
And I would build up layers of black enamel, and then cover it with a very, very thin dusting of white enamel that is grittier than flour, but much finer than salt.
And then you sprinkle it on there?
I would sift a layer on, remove it from where I didn't want it, and then refire it. You end up with a very dark gray and black. And then I would keep refiring it, building up the layers of white until I had the full range of depth. And then pure silver and pure gold foils. and then transparent and opalescent colors.
And you also work with stones,
Right.
because there's stones in here, right?
Right. Everything.
Let's see if we can get that, yeah.
It's druzy chrysocolla and gaspiite and uvarovite and emerald in quartz and a whole bunch of other things.
Did you take classes? Did you take lapidary classes?
No.
Well, then how'd you learn about all these stones?
By the seat of my pants and asking questions and becoming addicted to buying stones.
So you just learned going to, they have, what do they have? What
The Tucson Gem Show.
Yeah, that's what
Right.
the gem shows. Are those
Right.
great?
It's horrifying.
What is this work
It's
in here? Is
wonderful.
this all just little drawn pieces?
That's all handwork, and it amazes me. Sometimes people will ask me, "Oh, how did you get it to do that?" As
Yeah.
if it's crazy. But every single cell in the dragonfly wing is done by hand, and I use a ceramic ink after the thing is completely done, and then I let that dry to leather hard, and I go back with an X-Acto knife and cut at least half the thickness of each
So all
line.
these little lines in here
They're
are done with your little X-Acto knife.
Right.
And then do they go in a kiln?
That piece has been fired about 100 times
Is
because
that right?
there's 4 wings.
How big is your, and then it has a pearl, so you have to be careful with that because
Well,
they're
the
very
pearl
delicate,
the
aren't
pearl
they?
goes in separately. The enamel, each wing was done as an individual piece, and then it's brought together in the setting, and that has all kinds of very interesting stones in it.
When you do something like this, is there damage along the way? Like if you're making a ceramic dish?
Not very
sometime?
often.
There
ena-
isn't in this?
I've been doing this almost 38 years, and so my level of messing up has really gone down, and I'm very, very careful when I'm working. And
How long, like the brooch that you're wearing, how long would it take to make something like that? It has a pearl in it.
This is a New Zealand abalone pearl, and these are boulder opal.
Oh, there's stones in
right.
it, right?
And that's a split, so it's a natural stone. It's not cut on the
Oh, it
surface.
is.
You can feel the glassy surface of the
So how long
material.
would it take you to make that if you have to fire something 100 times?
At this point, it takes me about 2 weeks to do most pieces, but I work pretty steadily. I work at home, and I'm working constantly.
How many pieces can you do at the same time?
1.
Is that right? You only work on one piece at a time? You brought me something to show because I think this is kind of part of the process that you still can paint. You still paint and draw.
Actually, when I'm working just for myself, I only use line pencil to outline it because I see in my mind's eye where I want to go with the piece.
So did you start with this stone? Mm-hmm. And then
In
you
that
drew
case,
a kimono around it?
I call that series Kabuki Kachinas.
Oh, so there's a lot of these?
And, well, each one's as different as that one to mine or the other one that you're holding there.
Let me show the other one because maybe I'll just show them together because it shows how how the stones can be used in different drawings.
The one on your left is boulder opal, Australian boulder opal, and the one on the right is Yawa opal, also Australian. But there are a tremendous number of specific types of opal, which is something that just absolutely fascinates me.
Are they all thin so that they will fit flat in what you're doing?
No, I often have to recut them
Do you?
myself.
You do them yourself? You recut them?
Just, I just try and stay away from the best part of it, but I can reshape one and I can make it thinner, but it's a messy process.
Are they signed?
Every piece is numbered. The medals are engraved on the back. I write a poem for every piece that I engrave on the back, and sometimes a
Oh,
little
it
picture.
is back here.
Oh, price tag. Sorry.
That's okay.
That's from a show.
I'll just hold my finger over it. But this has you've engraved this and signed it. What does this poem say?
They've always been titled, but can I read it?
Sure.
This is a fairly new piece. This is Winter Kisses Autumn, limbing golden leaves with a shining silver frost.
And then how do you, with silver frost,
Silvered,
and look at
actually.
this beautiful, the pearls around it, the pearl frost.
Now the pearls were the impetus for that piece. I love, they're called rose petal pearls.
They're
And
beautiful.
they're nucleated with tissue rather than a bead. And so they end up very thin and very organic and beautiful.
They're so beautiful. And so you sign, your pieces are signed, and you put a poem with them. Where do you sell them?
Well, I still do shows, and
What are shows? Tell me what that, because we talked about the Gem Show. For people who don't know, I think it's intimidating to think of going into a show.
oh, well, actually, they shouldn't be intimidated because once they've walked in the door, we're there for their benefit. And in Los Angeles, I do 2 shows a year at the Contemporary Craft Market in San Francisco. And that has a great collection of people in various decorative art mediums, from clothing, jewelry, and that sort of thing.
And the other show down here?
It's just that one's twice a year, June
They
and
do
November.
it in San Francisco, and they do it in Los Angeles?
Mm-hmm.
And what crafts do they have at that show?
A lot of jewelers, wonderful handmade clothing, ceramics, paper, furniture.
I know. Baskets.
Yes,
Don't
too.
they? They have
Yes.
baskets. Where do they hold that? Where is that?
It's at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium.
Oh, so it's a huge space, and then they have booths. Everyone has booths.
Right, and they're beautifully done, and and everyone is there at your pleasure. You know, people,
Can you buy things there that you need for what you're doing?
no,
Probably not.
not
huh?
generally, not generally.
But then, is it the same group of people who go from craft show to craft show? You
There are
know
people
each
that
other?
I've been doing shows with for the length of my career, and there are also, more interestingly, people who come to it who I've known now.
You mean as clients?
Across the counter, we've seen each other every 6 months for 38 years, and their kids are now older than we were when we met.
Oh, that's so great.
It is wonderful.
So I think craft shows are really a wonderful place to go, and I'm glad that you brought us this information.
Well, thank
I
you.
want to thank Jenny Oken for the painting that's on the set today, and we want you to keep writing to 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles 90017. Thank you.